25. Perry swooped into the dictator's box like a dark, avenging angel. She tucked her legs up in midair, folding her ankle winglets flat, and dived feet first into the last knot of Vitellius's guards remaining in the box, knocking them into a confused heap. She had a brief glimpse of Cleopatra's startled face before the doors at the rear of the box were slammed shut. Perry hovered above a frozen tableau of amazed faces. "Don't just stand there," she admonished. "You've got a city to defend, haven't you?" Then she saw the doctor sprawled in a corner. In an instant, she had dropped to the ground beside him. He twitched and tossed his head as though he was falling into a bad dream. The broken components of the resonator were trailing from his wristband. His features blurred and began to change. She bent over and scooped him up into her arms. She had to get him back to the TARDIS as soon as possible. Agricola was by her side, holding a length of drapery like a rope, looking at her again in delight and wonder. "I've got to get the doctor somewhere safe," she said quickly, "but I'll be back, I promise." He nodded. "I'm going to help Ptolemy." Her wings spread, and with a rush of air she took off. "What's your name?" he called out after her. "Perry," she shouted back. Agricola smiled. He ran back to the front of the box and started tying the improvised rope to the rail. The ring was a confused mass of fighting men and animals. Somewhere in the center was Ptolemy. He wouldn't leave him this time. Smoke rose in black columns from a dozen fires scattered across the city. Beyond the walls, Perry could see the wreckage of at least 3 of the smaller Roman airships burning on the airfield. High overhead circled the great bulks of Cleopatra's airships, keeping clear of any ground fire and dropping bombs on outlying military installations. Lower down were the fighters, buzzing like wasps over the city, tiny flickers of orange flame spouting from their gun muzzles as they strafed smaller targets. The day wasn't going quite as anyone had planned, she thought. Perry flew determinedly on, cradling the doctor in her arms. Behind her, one airship drifted across the city to come to a halt beside the arena. Cleopatra's party emerged from the arches of the arena to find the great bulk of the Horus filling the sky of the deserted street outside, its gimbaled engines roaring as they angled against the breeze, holding the ship steady. A net-sided cargo platform was resting on the ground, suspended on lines from the airship's forward hatch. A recovered Gandos, sporting a large bruise on his jaw, was already standing beside it. His eyes dropped in shame as he saw his mistress. The party piled onto the platform, and Cleopatra grabbed the intercom microphone that communicated with the Horus's control cabin. "Maxentius, did you get it?" she demanded anxiously. "Yes, Majesty. There was some resistance." "Never mind that. This is what you do now." Perry flew on over the rooftops, heading for the tomb, her wings beating heavily. She could feel the strain of carrying another person at speed. Whatever the source of her ability, she prayed it would sustain her for just another minute more, and that none of the fighters would see them. In her arms, the doctor muttered, "Brave heart, Perry." Then she felt his body squirm and shiver in her grasp in some indescribable way, and she almost dropped him. The wind-blown flaxen hair of the doctor she had first known seemed to curl and fill out. His boyish features blurred and distorted again. Suddenly, she was carrying an older man with an unruly mop of dark, curled hair, a beaky nose, and crinkled lines around his eyes, one of which suddenly and disconcertingly blinked wide open. "Hello, I'm the doctor," he said brightly. "I guessed that," said Perry despairingly. This was worse than before, she thought. She'd found her alternate point of stability, but where was the doctor's? Please try to hang on. I'm getting you to the TARDIS as fast as I can." The eye rolled expressively in its socket before focusing on her again. "Are we flying?" "I'm flying. You're a passenger. You've changed again. Oh, hell." The doctor's hair whitened. His features became more craggy and cheerfully lined. His nose grew distinguishedly prominent. His eyes flickered open again. "Ah, hello, my dear. Did rather well against Gandos, didn't I?" "What? Oh, sure. Look, Doctor." The doctor frowned. "Paulinus, what happened to him?" "Sorry, I think he's dead." "Oh, poor chap." "Doctor, what happens when you run out of bodies?" "Oh, no." The little man with the gentle, puckish face and dark, beetle hairstyle looked about him anxiously. "Oh, dear," he exclaimed in a tremulous voice. "This is all rather unsettling." "For you and me both," Perry said with feeling. The tomb was in sight, but she wasn't certain she'd reach it in time. "Doctor, how many bodies have you got left? And what happens then?" "Ah, well, actually, I'm not sure. Probably best not to find out, really." Perry dropped out of the sky towards the temple roof with relief. The sprightly old man with the flowing white hair and diamond-bright eyes, who she set down a few paces from the hole in the pyramid roof, immediately turned and waved her impatiently away. "Will you manage to get back to the ship from here?" she asked anxiously. "Only I must get back to help Ptolemy." "Of course you must," he responded brusquely. "Don't worry about me, child. I had this body longer than any. I'll master it yet. If the TARDIS is suitably charged, I'll attempt to track down the Rani's TARDIS, and then we shall see. Now, be off with you, and don't do anything foolish." And he turned and ducked through the hole in the pyramid wall. The spear thrust past Ptolemy into the chest of one of the Praetorians who faced him. He hacked at the other, cutting deep into his sword arm, and the man staggered away, clutching his wound. Ptolemy turned to find Agricola by his side, blood-streaked but triumphant, changing a sword over to his good arm to replace the spear. "I didn't run away this time," he gasped. His eyes were purposeful and more knowing than they had been in years. Ptolemy clasped his hand in delight. Then they turned to face their next adversary together. The fighter plane dived at Perry, its engine note rising ominously, its forward machine gun chattering. Just like in the movies, she thought wildly, banking to one side to avoid the stream of lead and glowing tracer bullets. What its pilot thought she was, she could not imagine, but nobody was going to shoot at her and get away with it. Perry scooped the air with her wings, braking, and the plane shot over her head. She accelerated after it, keeping the tailplane between her and the rear gunner, buffeted by the craft's slipstream. It tried to gain height to escape her, but she determinedly closed in. She reached out and grasped the tailplane, her talons sinking into the fabric. The gunner was gesticulating madly to the pilot, but he could not shoot at her without damaging his plane. With her free hand, she unclipped the hand unit of the molecular cutter she had used to sever the arena rigging line. She could see control wires running out of the fuselage and over small struts, which gave leverage to work the rudder and elevators. She slashed at them, and the control surfaces suddenly flapped uselessly. The plane started a long, slow, rolling dive, heading out over the city walls. Perry tumbled free and fell behind the doomed craft, watching the crew bail out. Their parachutes blossomed open, and they began to drift down to the war-torn city. She didn't think their landing would be a happy one. The huge shadow of the Horus rolled over the arena, blotting out the sun and bringing an unnatural half-light with it. The droning roar of its engines reverberated around the amphitheatre, driving the maddened animals to howl and snarl more wildly than before, and drawing new cries of alarm and uncertainty from the fighting populace. The cargo platform swung down out of the sky over the ring, manned by Gandos and a dozen soldiers. Vitellius's surviving guards, thinking they were being rescued, tried to battle their way towards the platform, but it had not come for them. The soldiers on the platform fired indiscriminately into the melee in the ring, at friend, foe, and beast alike, clearing a way for them to grind to earth in the blood-stained sand. The soldiers leaped from the platform towards Ptolemy and Agricola. The doctor tottered through the doors of the TARDIS with the last of his strength, staggered to the console, pressed the door control almost by reflex, and sagged over the instruments as they swung smoothly closed. He felt the confusion and disorientation of the multiple retro-regenerations weighing upon him. It was the burden not of his age, but of his heritage. He knew Peri did not understand why she had found a stable pattern more easily than he. Before life had appeared on Earth, his people had experimented with their genetic structure, mastering the secret of regeneration. But there had been a price, he thought. There always was. The nausea washed over him again. He saw his own hands change, the wrinkles smoothing out as the TARDIS's morphic field forced his body back through his first regeneration. He wanted desperately to rest, but he did not have time. That was ironic. Normally, he could have kept the TARDIS in transit as long as he wished, and no time would have passed elsewhere. But within an alien micro-universe and short of power, he could not risk more than a few minutes, relatively speaking, before materializing again. He checked the power levels. Was there enough? Barely. He crossed his fingers and activated the manual override on the mass converter. Deep within the TARDIS, the shells of empty and forgotten chambers were collapsed and fed into the converter. Matter became energy. The lights on the console brightened as the auxiliary functions returned. The doctor clapped his hands together in delight, his feet twitching to the memory of an ancient jig. Halfway through, he changed again and had to support himself against the console. This won't do, he told himself firmly, running a hand through his curly white hair. He adjusted the controls and set the long-range detectors to work. Peri saw the Horus rise up from the arena as she approached. What had it been doing? The craft soared away to join the rest of the fleet. As she watched, puffs of black smoke started bursting around one of the airships. Rome obviously had some sort of anti-aircraft weapons, and somebody had wrested them from the control of Vitellius's men. The vulnerable airships started to pull away from the city, leaving the fighters to continue the attack. She dived down to the ring where she had last seen Ptolemy. The amphitheatre was half empty now. The guards on the stairs had retreated when Vitellius and Cleopatra had run, leaving the inner wall guards trapped between the people, the beasts, and the gladiators. The last pockets of these were being subdued as she arrived. Peri felt sick as she flew low over the carnage of the ring, ignoring the cries of surprise her reappearance caused, searching for Ptolemy. Perhaps he had reached the seats or the box. She hoped so. Then she saw Agricola. He was lying amid a bloody mass of bodies, both human and animal. He still held a sword in his hand. A cold knot of grief twisted in her stomach as she dropped down beside him. One look at his many wounds was enough to tell he was dying. Gently, she cradled him in her arms, ignoring the blood that seeped onto her feathers. Agricola's eyes slowly focused on her. "Didn't run away this time," he said faintly. "No, you've been very brave," she choked. Where's Ptolemy?" "Gandos. Soldiers took him in. Airship. Must find him. I will, I promise." "Feel tired. Rest. You've made everything right now. You don't have to feel guilty anymore. You've done your duty. Go to sleep. Agricola gently grew heavy in her arms and was still. Perry realized there were now people close by, pointing a miscellany of weapons uncertainly at her. She wiped away her tears and looked into the face of a man whose agonized expression left no doubt who he was. "Your son died very bravely," she said simply to Gaius Agricola. She took a deep breath. "Now I am going after Ptolemy Caesar and the people who did this." She laid Agricola carefully down and rose. There was a nervous shuffle away from her as she unfolded and spread her wings. "What? Who are you?" asked a distinguished old man with a commanding air. "A friend of Ptolemy's." "Are you Senator Glabrio?" Perry demanded. "Yes, but how—" "Never mind. You'd better take charge here if you haven't already. Do—" she hesitated. "Do whatever you have to do. I've got an airship to catch." Her wings beat down with a determined thump, and she took off in a swirl of sand and dust. The TARDIS materialized into a dimly lit chamber that looked very similar to one of its own rooms, having the same patterns of recessed roundels on the walls. The doors of the TARDIS opened, and the Doctor, back to his proper incarnation once more, peered out cautiously. The room was still and quiet. He beamed in satisfaction and stepped outside, pulling on his multicolored coat as he went. The tangles of cables and makeshift control panels strewn about the room were evidence of the repairs and improvisations the Rani had been forced to undertake. He examined them for a moment, with grudging admiration for her ingenuity. There was an arch in one wall which looked as though it should lead to another compartment. Set within it, however, was a crude metal framework linked to wires and several pieces of haywire circuitry, enclosing a panel that was totally black, except for the shape of an ornate full-length mirror silhouetted in the middle. The Doctor nodded to himself in understanding. A short-range transfer interface with minimal directional control. No wonder she had not risked using it to gain access to the Oracle directly. It looked highly unsafe. Looking through it, he saw the interior of Cleopatra's stateroom in the Horus. He twisted about, without touching the surface, trying to see all round the cabin. It seemed empty. He continued his rapid exploration. In one corner of the room, a rectangular storage module had been laid on its side and its lid removed. The Doctor peered inside and found himself staring at the tranquil features of the real Cleopatra Selene. She was clearly deep in an induced sleep. Wires ran from contacts taped to her head and body to a piece of equipment resembling his own TARDIS's morphic stabilizer unit. This was how the Rani was maintaining her counterfeit body pattern. He was tempted to break the connections on the spot, but he counselled himself to be patient. Another archway led out of the control room into a short corridor. As he entered it, he thought he could hear a faint voice. He frowned and walked a few steps. The voice got louder. It seemed to come from a room just ahead, the entrance of which showed nothing but darkness. Moving silently, he crept up and peered within. "Sky turns, low-pressure region crosses big sea, winds grow stronger, change direction." The voice rumbled from somewhere unseen, suggesting a gentle giant plodding through some weary route. But the Doctor was more fascinated by what he saw in the middle of the room. Hanging in the blackness was a delicate misty sphere, formed by thousands of pinpoints of light. Within the sphere was what appeared to be an intricately patterned dome, coloured in blues and greens and whirls of white, and lit by a bright yellow point of light hovering over its surface. Intrigued, the Doctor took a step forward and found there was no floor in the room. He twisted round as he started to fall and grasped the doorframe. hanging by his fingertips with his feet being gently drawn towards the dome. His skin tingled as though he were halfway through a pressure curtain. A sense of proportion asserted itself. This was no room. The archway opened out directly into the void of the micro-universe. The coloured dome was actually the copied Earth segment viewed from thousands of miles directly overhead. He had almost taken the longest step of his life. The voice stopped talking to itself, and the doctor had a sense that something huge but unseen had just drawn closer. The force field of the pressure curtain vibrated, transmitting the being's words through the air. "Oh, who, you? You not her? You knew." Perry pursued the retreating Horus with cold determination, arrowing through the air with all the force she could muster, willing each beat of her wings to drive her faster. The matter had become personal. If she could feel this bad about the death of somebody she had only known through a sad story and a few minutes of actual contact, then she wasn't about to let it happen to anyone closer. There was the flash of an explosion in the distance on her right as the anti-aircraft fire found a target. The airship seemed to crumple, its back breaking as gas cells burst one after another. Tongues of orange flame licked across its skin, and it started the long fall to earth. The sound of the rumbling explosions reached her seconds later. Perversely, she was momentarily elated by the spectacle of Rome fighting back against the invaders. Then she thought of the men dying as she watched, and went cold again. This had to be stopped now. She would rescue Ptolemy, if humanely possible. If Cleopatra/Rani crossed her path in doing so, well, she would think of something. Vitellius strode through the cabin door of Cleopatra's stateroom, his face contorted with barely contained anger. Gandos followed, pushing a dazed and bloody Ptolemy before him. Ptolemy's hands were bound behind his back. Cleopatra appeared in the corridor, directing a party of crewmen who were carrying the oracle between them. The top and base sections had been separated, but it was still a tight fit through the relatively narrow doorway. Cleopatra seemed to be fearful lest the oracle suffer any damage, and she berated the men mercilessly for causing the slightest scrape. Vitellius fought to maintain his composure. Get rid of the men first, he thought. Then she will find out what I think of her actions. The doctor stood in the corridor facing the black void of the micro-universe. "Don't you understand?" he implored. "You've got to take responsibility for what you've created." "Created?" pondered the creature. "No, not created. Me not create, me read and write. It means the same thing. The people down there only exist because of what you did. Now you've got to take care of them properly." "I'm taking care of them," the creature insisted. "I'm keeping them warm, and keeping air around them, and keeping them from going over edge of world. Make sure all the animals, even the mixed-up ones, stay alive." "But you can't go on like that forever. They need a whole world of their own, even the mixed-up ones." "She says me have to, or else she says she leave me all alone forever. She leave me for a time not long ago. It was bad, but me learn to make things happen down there, to write things, and learn to feel all the little lives going on. That's nice." It paused. "Maybe," it hazarded rebelliously, "if she go away, I go to world forever. Never be alone, ever again, me." "I," corrected the doctor automatically, "I will never be alone again." "What mean I?" "It's the sound you use when talking about yourself. If you tell somebody your name, you say, 'I am called.' What is your name, by the way?" The creature was experimenting curiously. I am called. I am called. Called I am. I am. I am called. I am. The doctor did not argue. Pleased to meet you, I am. Now, about the world. You nice. You tell me what things mean. She just say, do this, do that, or I leave you. There was a thoughtful pause. Tell I what fool means. The doctor sighed. He hadn't much time, he was getting caught up in a language lesson. But it was hard to be angry with the creature, with I am. A fool is someone who is stupid, who gets something wrong, who can't do what they're told properly. There was an ominous rumbling from the blackness. Oh, that not nice. She call me fool. Me. I only did what she asked. She not say properly, not my fault. I am not fool. I'm sure you're not, the doctor interjected quickly. So, what about showing her you're not a fool by doing something really clever? What? I am asked doubtfully. Make a real, complete world for all those people down there. A world just like their old one, but orbiting a new sun in real space. I am pondered. Never made whole world before. That a lot of writing. I can give you all the details, all the information on how the world should be made up. Information? Yes, you'll know what almost everything means then. That nice. But I don't want to be alone again. You won't have to be. You can leave here once you've shaped the new world. Leave here? Yes. With what you've already learned, you should be able to pass through the interface around your universe when you drop the new world into real space. Didn't you realize you could leave? She never said I could leave. She said she would leave me. The doctor's face pinched in anger. I might have known. I am, believe me. Once you have set things right, you can go where you like. You will have discharged your responsibility for what you did to these people. You will be free. There's... The doctor paused, aware of an imminent and apparently unavoidable cliché. There's a whole new universe out there, just waiting for you. Perry landed flat on the great grey expanse of the Horus's fuselage, spread-eagling herself and digging in the talons on her fingers and toes against the slipstream. She gasped for breath. She was exhausted. Her wings and shoulders ached, and she felt a strange tiredness deep within herself, as though she had been drawing on a source of energy more quickly than it could be replenished. Probably she was. She just wished she understood the mechanism better. Certainly it proved she was no super being anyway. Perhaps it was best that way. Clawing at the fabric skin, she began to work her way over the curve of the hull and down towards the control and passenger decks. What did you mean by risking everything to recover this? Vitellius stabbed an accusing finger at the oracle. It had been reassembled inside the stateroom, and the crew had departed. Cleopatra was running her hands across the intricate device almost lovingly, paying scant attention to Vitellius's tirade. Gandos stood with his accustomed immobility in the corner, while Ptolemy was slumped, sick and exhausted on a couch. Do you realize, Vitellius continued, that by having this ship raid the Oracle Temple, you caused the fighting to start outside the arena? Why couldn't you have waited if you wanted it so much? That's when everything started to go wrong. No, countered Cleopatra, raising commanding green eyes to meet his angry gaze, causing him to flinch away from her. Where it started going wrong was in the inaccurate intelligence you gave me about the level of popular support for Ptolemy. Well, how was I to know about it? Vitellius protested. It only happened in the last few days. After the years I spent encouraging Alexander in his delusions, pushing him towards the point where he'd do something foolish, which he did, how could I know Ptolemy was going to step in and play the hero? He sneered. Anyway, whose champion was supposed to win the day in the arena and impress the people with the power of the East? How could I know Ptolemy had this doctor on his side? And what of the harpy thing? Am I to blame for that? Cleopatra became sullen at the mention of the doctor and returned to admiring the oracle. Vitellius decided to try a new tack. Selene, he said gently, let us not fight over this. We still have much to do, if the attack on the city is to be maintained until the surface fleet arrives. That hardly matters now, Cleopatra said dismissively. It would have been simpler to have taken the city as we planned. But now I have the oracle and Ptolemy, there are better ways. Vitellius frowned. We will not have time to learn anything new from the oracle if we do not conquer Rome within a few days. Even with Ptolemy as a hostage, they still have Ultimus, and others besides Alexander know about it. Oh, I don't want Ptolemy as a hostage. I have a better and subtler use for him, his body at least. Now he has made himself so popular, I will turn it to my purposes. I will rule this world, she smiled, in one form or another. None of this made sense to Vitellius, but her last words bothered him. We, he corrected her gently, we will rule together. He smiled and caught her about the waist, pulling her close. Remember last year in Alexandria? The plans we made, the nights we spent together? She laughed mockingly. All only a memory, fortunately, and not even mine. She looked at him clinically for a moment, as though assessing the worth of something that had crawled out from under a stone. You convinced yourself you had made a conquest. How like a man. But Cleopatra was simply using you. She thought you were boring. And I agree with her. Vitellius was goggling in incomprehension at her words. On the couch, Ptolemy levered himself upright. Beware, Vitellius, he called out weakly. She is not who she seems. So, said Cleopatra, you have been talking to the doctor. The doctor worked frantically over his console, his hands flying across the controls in a blur, readings and calculations flashing across the displays. He entered a final sequence of figures, then stood back, flexing his fingers, beaming in satisfaction. Balanced on top of the time rotor was a reel of fibre optic cable. He plugged one end into a socket under the console and backed out the doors, unreeling the rest as he went. Through the mirror interface, he saw there were people in the stateroom now. He ran out into the corridor, laying the cable as fast as he could. He pulled the other end from the reel as he reached Iam's doorway and tossed it into the blackness. Something invisible caught it and drew it taut. Ah! exclaimed Iam. Information! The doctor sprinted back to the makeshift control room and peered anxiously through the false mirror. He saw Vitellius take hold of Cleopatra. Take your time, he thought. Just stay out of here for another 2 minutes. Distantly, he could hear Iam muttering, Retroactive extrapolation. Solar orientation. That is how it's done. She is not Cleopatra, continued Ptolemy, speaking defiantly despite his position. She is called Rani, and she has no place here. Cleopatra regarded him thoughtfully. I admire your spirit, Ptolemy Caesar. You have courage and some intelligence. Yes, you will make a better tool than this one here. She spoke as though Vitellius's hands were not laid upon her at that moment. Vitellius snarled. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded, shaking her violently. Gandalf took a step towards the pair. "I think," said Cleopatra calmly, "that your function from now on, Vitellius, will be purely ornamental." She raised a hand. A needle sprang out from one of her heavy rings, and she stabbed it into his upper arm. Vitellius jerked away from her, clutching the wound as though it burned. His lips parted, but only a faint gasp emerged. Slowly, he sank to the ground, a dark tint infusing his skin. Then a green tongue erupted grotesquely from his mouth. His arms and legs contorted, his fingers elongating and twisting into stalks swelling with buds, while the toes spread through the straps of his sandals into curling root tendrils. His body collapsed like a deflated balloon, and lush greenery pushed through the remains of his clothing with a swish and pop of spreading leaves. In a moment, a large shrub lay on the cabin floor where Vitellius had fallen. "How appropriately parochial," Cleopatra commented mildly. "A rubber plant." She turned to Ptolemy, who was staring in horrified disbelief at the remains. "A sample of my power, which you would do well to remember." A window panel suddenly blew out and tumbled away into the blue, and a blast of air rushed into the stateroom. With it came Perry. For a moment, Cleopatra was rendered speechless. Gandalf sprang forward to face Perry, massive arms spread ready. Perry waved the molecular cutter hand unit threateningly in front of him. "Tell him this thing's dangerous," she warned. "Oh, yes, it's the whining Miss Brown, isn't it?" said Cleopatra, recovering her composure. "Your appearance has improved since we first met." Her eyes narrowed and she smiled thinly. "Do you know your power pack charge light is flashing? Gandalf, she's unarmed. Kill her." Gandalf grabbed at her throat. Perry caught his wrists, talons biting deep into the flesh, and held him off. For a moment, a look of surprise flickered over Gandalf's face at finding his strength matched. They stood locked together, swaying, muscles straining. Cleopatra drew a long, needle-like dart, glistening with venom, from her broad collar, and held it ready to throw. Ptolemy surged up from the couch and charged shoulder first, knocking the breath from her and sending her sprawling, the deadly dart spinning away into the corner of the room. Inside the Rani's TARDIS, the Doctor tore the connections from the real body of Cleopatra and scooped her up in his arms. Gandalf still had the advantage of greater weight, and Perry felt herself being forced backwards. Instinctively, she stopped resisting and deliberately fell onto her back and the folded cushion of her wings, tucking her legs up into her chest, her feet pressed into his stomach. As his weight bore down upon her, she kicked out with all her strength. He tumbled through the air over her head and disappeared from her view without a sound. Perry sprang to her feet, twisting round to face him again. There was only the whistling space of the empty window frame. Cleopatra let out a wild cry. She writhed on the floor as her features blurred and flowed. As Perry helped Ptolemy to his feet and released his bonds, the last resemblance to Cleopatra faded, and the Rani's true form appeared. She raged within herself. The shock of the sudden and unexpected change drove cool calculation and reason temporarily from the Rani's mind, leaving only anger, frustration, and loss. Loss! Yes, the Doctor had been right, curse him. She felt she had lost half of herself when he had taken the Cleopatra pattern from her. Taken? He was inside her TARDIS, and standing before her were two more enemies. Even as this realization dawned, her flailing arm brushed through the leaves of the rubber plant that had been Vitellius, and fell upon his holstered pistol. With a hiss of satisfaction, she tore it free and, clasping the primitive and unfamiliar weapon in both hands, she pointed it wildly at Perry and Ptolemy and pulled the trigger. The gun boomed. They dived for cover. The recoil astounded the Rani. It was as though the weapon kicked in her hands. The trigger was amazingly heavy. She fired again and again in a mad rage. 2 shots went through the ceiling, and she froze. Reason returned. Too late. Perry snatched Ptolemy up in her arms and dived for the window. Inside the Rani's TARDIS, Ian called out joyfully, "All working done! We go now!" The Rani plunged through the mirror into a control room, just in time to see the Doctor's TARDIS dematerialize. The first of the Horus's gas cells exploded, sending a great bluish tongue of burning hydrogen up into the sky. The shockwave of the explosion tore the fabric from the upper curve of the hull, exposing its latticed ribs, and sent Perry and Ptolemy tumbling through the air. The Rani dived back through the mirror into her stateroom, dragging a cable behind her as a crackling sheet of flame rippled across the ceiling and the floor began to heel over. She slammed the connector end into a socket under the Oracle console. The cabin door blew in, and a ball of fire rolled towards her as she slammed her hand down on the controls. One after another, the gas cells of the Horus exploded. Fire consumed it even as it plunged out of the sky, its naked and crumpling metal skeleton enclosing nothing now but a hollow, furnace-like interior, yellow and orange flames of the fuel oil completing the work the hydrogen started. It fell amid a shower of fluttering strips of fabric, drifting downward in its wake like burning confetti. Beating her wings heavily, Perry carried herself and Ptolemy clear of the dying airship. Then it seemed to go cold for a moment. A yellow dwarf star lay in an outer spiral arm of the galaxy. A handful of attendant planets orbited about it, some close enough for lead to melt on their surfaces, others so far out that ammonia and methane cloaked them in icy desolation. But the orbital band, with a mean distance of approximately 94 million miles, was unoccupied. At a certain point along this band, space itself began to distort and ripple. There was a blaze of light, and a blue and white world and an attendant moon appeared where there had been nothing a moment before, falling smoothly along their appointed orbits, as though they had always done so. The last traces of vortex energy sparkled from the sky and were gone. A storm wind seemed to blow up from nowhere, setting Perry and Ptolemy spinning for a moment or two, and clouds boiling across the land. Then it faded to a fitful gust, a zephyr, and it too was gone. There was the deepest of bass tones as the whole world trembled, settled, and found a new equilibrium. Then that also slowly died away. Normality was restored. And, 1,500 yards up in the air, Perry found the power of flight leave her. They started to fall. Her wings caught the air, but were suddenly quite inadequate even for gliding. One by one, her feathers started to drop out and flutter away in their wake. Perry looked helplessly into Ptolemy's eyes. "Sorry," she said simply. The TARDIS materialized underneath them, lying on its side, its open doors uppermost. They passed between the doors, and Perry had a momentary glimpse of the control room flashing past at a strange angle. Then there was water below. A gentle force was slowing their fall, and they dropped out of the painted sky of the fresco into the TARDIS's swimming pool. The remaining occupants of the Harena Maximus got cautiously to their feet after the brief earth tremor. For a moment it had grown unnaturally bright, and the dust, which the sudden storm blast of wind had stirred up, hazed the air, setting everybody coughing. At least the fighters seemed to have broken off their attack. The drone of their engines grew dim in the distance. Then came a new sound. It was a whirring, groaning noise that swelled steadily, the tone deepening. Then, in the very centre of the arena, a rectangular blue box with a flashing light on the top faded into solidity out of the dusty air. There was a surprising thump of reality. Then all was quiet. Before several thousand pairs of astonished eyes, a door in the side of the box opened, and Ptolemy Caesar stepped out onto the sand. Such was the depth of their surprise that he managed to walk quite 5 paces before the cheering started.